I never thought I'd hear those words in my own home, the house my late husband and I built with every ounce of love we had. But there she stood. My daughter in law, Chloe, arms crossed, voice cold as ice. If you don't like living with us, leave. And my son, Ryan, he didn't say a word. That was the moment I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just being disrespected, I was being replaced. What Chloe didn't know was this everything they depended on. Every wall, every bill, every comfort still belonged to me, and I was done being silent. If this opening hit something in your heart, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever felt pushed out of your own space, even by family? Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I read every comment. And if stories like this matter to you, don't forget to like and subscribe so we can keep sharing these moments together. When my husband David was still alive, this house was never just a place to sleep. It was our life's work, our quiet rebellion against every setback we'd ever faced. We bought the land when we were both in our early 30s, back when money was tight and dreams felt fragile. I still remember standing in the middle of that empty lot in Ohio, holding David's hand as he said, "One day, Mel, this is where we'll grow old together." We didn't have much back then. David worked long hours as a mechanic, and I balanced two part-time jobs while finishing my certification in legal accounting. We saved every spare dollar, skipped vacations, and learned how to fix things ourselves. I painted walls while 8 months pregnant with Ryan. David built shelves by hand because we couldn't afford store-bought ones. Every corner of that house carries a memory, laughter arguments, late-night talks, and quiet mornings filled with coffee and hope. After David passed away 10 years ago, the house became both my comfort and my burden. The silence was overwhelming at first. I would sometimes catch myself setting out 2 coffee cups in the morning, only to stand there staring at the extra one, unsure of what to do with it. But I stayed. I stayed because leaving felt like abandoning him, like erasing everything we had built together. For a long time, it was just me and the memories. Ryan used to visit often back then. He'd sit with me at the kitchen table, asking about his dad, laughing at old stories. He was a good son, kind, thoughtful, a little lost after losing his father, but still grounded in the values we had raised him with. Things began to change after he met Chloe. At first, I wanted to like her. Truly, I did. She was confident, polished, and spoke with a kind of certainty that made you feel like she always knew exactly what she wanted. Ryan seemed happy, and that was enough for me. I welcomed her into our family with open arms. I invited her into my kitchen, shared recipes, offered advice only when asked. I tried to be the kind of mother-in-law I wished I'd had, but there was always something distant about her. She didn't linger in conversations. She didn't ask questions about our family history. When I showed her old photo albums, she would smile politely, then check her phone. At the time, I told myself it was just a generational difference. Young people were different, I thought. Faster, busier, less sentimental. I never imagined it was something deeper. About 2 years ago, Ryan called me one evening, his voice unusually tense. He explained that he and Chloe were going through a temporary financial setback. The company he worked for had downsized, and Chloe's freelance income wasn't stable enough to cover their expenses. They needed a place to stay, just for a few months. 3 months, Mom, he said, just until we get back on our feet. Of course, I said yes. What kind of mother wouldn't? They moved in the following week. At first, it felt almost nice to have people in the house again. The silence was replaced by footsteps, voices, the hum of daily life. I cooked dinners for all of us, happy to see Ryan sitting at the same table where he had grown up. For a brief moment, it felt like I had my family back, but little things started to shift. 3 months came and went, and nothing changed. Ryan found a new job, but somehow there was always a reason they couldn't move out yet. Chloe said the housing market was terrible. Then she said they needed more time to save. Then it became about finding the right place. Meanwhile, the financial responsibility quietly remained on my shoulders. I paid the property taxes as I always had. I covered the electricity, the water, the heating, especially during those long Ohio winters. The grocery bills doubled, then tripled, but Chloe rarely offered to contribute. When she did, it was small things, maybe picking up a carton of milk or a loaf of bread, always presented as if it were a generous gesture. Ryan would occasionally mention pitching in, but Chloe would quickly dismiss it. "We're already trying to save," she'd say. "It doesn't make sense to throw money away when we're planning to move soon." Soon. That word started to lose its meaning. I told myself to be patient. I reminded myself that family helps family. That's what David would have done. But patience has a way of turning into quiet exhaustion. There were moments when I would sit alone in my bedroom at night, listening to the muffled sound of their laughter from the living room, and feel like a stranger in my own home. It wasn't just the financial burden, it was the subtle shift in atmosphere. I was no longer the center of this house. I was an afterthought. Still, I didn't say anything. Not yet. Part of me was afraid that if I spoke up, I might lose Ryan completely. And after losing David, that was a risk I wasn't ready to take. But deep down, something inside me was starting to stir. A quiet voice, barely audible at first, whispering that something wasn't right. I just didn't know how wrong things would become. And I certainly didn't realize that the house I had spent decades building was slowly slipping out of my hands, not legally, not yet, but emotionally, piece by piece. Looking back now, I can see the signs were all there. I just chose not to see them. It didn't happen all at once. That's the part I keep replaying in my mind, the slow, almost invisible way things changed. If it had been sudden, maybe I would have fought back sooner. Maybe I would have drawn a line the moment I felt it being crossed. But instead, it came in small, reasonable steps. The kind you can explain away. The kind you tell yourself don't really matter. Until suddenly, they do. The first thing Chloe changed was the living room. It had always been my favorite space in the house. David built the fireplace himself, brick by brick, and we used to sit there every winter evening, wrapped in blankets, talking about everything and nothing. I kept his old armchair by the window, exactly where he liked it, with the same worn cushion that still held the faint scent of his cologne, or at least I like to believe it did. One afternoon, I came home from grocery shopping and found the room different. The armchair was gone. At first, I thought maybe they had moved it to vacuum or rearranged temporarily. But as I stepped further inside, I realized the entire layout had changed. The coffee table had been replaced with a sleek glass one. The old bookshelf David built was nowhere to be seen. Even the curtains hand-stitched by my mother decades ago had been taken down and replaced with something gray and modern. "Chloe." I called out, my voice echoing strangely in the unfamiliar space. She appeared from the hallway smiling as if she had just done me a favor. "Oh, you're back early," she said. What do you think? I stood there, still holding the grocery bags, trying to process what I was seeing. "What happened to my things?" I asked carefully. "They're not gone," she replied quickly, waving a hand as if to dismiss my concern. "I just put them in storage. The room needed a refresh. It was feeling a little outdated." Outdated. The word landed heavier than she probably intended. I swallowed, setting the bags down on the counter. "You should have asked me first." Chloe's smile tightened just slightly. "I didn't think it would be a big deal. I mean, we all live here now, right? It should feel like home for everyone. We all live here now." There was something about the way she said it, so casual, so certain, that made my chest tighten. Before I could respond, Ryan walked in, glancing between us. "Hey, Mom," he said as if nothing was wrong. "Looks great, doesn't it?" I looked at him, searching his face for something, understanding maybe, or at least hesitation. But he just shrugged lightly, already turning toward the kitchen. "Chloe has a good eye for design," he added. It was time for an upgrade. An upgrade. I nodded slowly, though inside something cracked. "It's different," I said. And that was the end of it. Or at least that's what I told myself. Over the next few weeks, more changes followed. My kitchen, my sanctuary, began to feel less like mine. Chloe reorganized the cabinets, moving everything into places that made sense to her, not to me. The spices I had arranged carefully over years were suddenly out of reach. The cookware David had gifted me on our 25th anniversary was pushed to the back, replaced by newer, trendier sets Chloe ordered online. Even the refrigerator felt unfamiliar. The meals I used to prepare simple, comforting dishes were replaced by meal prep containers labeled with dates and calorie counts. Just trying to keep things healthy, Chloe would say, smiling as if I had asked. But I hadn't. What hurt the most wasn't the changes themselves. It was how easily I was erased from the process. Friends started coming over, Chloe's friends. People I had never met before filling my living room with laughter that didn't include me. I would hear them from my bedroom, their voices carrying through the walls. "This place is amazing," one of them said once. Chloe laughed. "I know, right? We got really lucky." We. Not my mother-in-law has a beautiful home. Not Melissa built this place over decades. Just we. I stood in the hallway that night, listening, feeling like a ghost in my own life. Ryan didn't notice, or maybe he chose not to. When I tried to bring things up gently, carefully, he would always find a way to minimize it. "Mom, you're overthinking," he'd say. "Chloe's just trying to help." Help. That word began to sound like something else entirely. One evening, I overheard something that made my stomach turn. Chloe was on the phone in the living room, her voice low but clear enough in the quiet house. "Yeah, it's basically ours at this point," she said. "I mean, she's here, but she doesn't really do much anymore. We're the ones maintaining everything." I froze in the hallway, my hand gripping the edge of the wall. "It's just a matter of time," she continued. "Once we figure out the paperwork, it'll be official." Paperwork. Official. My heart began to pound. I leaned closer, straining to hear more, but her voice dropped to a whisper. A moment later, she laughed lightly, as if whatever she had said next wasn't something meant to be overheard. I stepped back quietly, my mind racing. At that moment, something inside me shifted. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was real. For the first time, I stopped telling myself that everything was fine. For the first time, I allowed myself to see what was actually happening. This wasn't just about decorating choices or shared space. This was about control, about ownership, about slowly pushing me out without ever having to say it directly. And the most painful part, my own son was standing right beside her, watching it happen. That night, I sat alone in my bedroom, staring at the old photo of David on my nightstand. "I think I've been too quiet," I whispered. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel just sad. I felt alert. And somewhere deep inside, something stronger than grief began to rise. I didn't know exactly what Chloe was planning, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to lose my home without a fight. I spent the next few days moving through my own house like a careful guest, quiet, observant, measuring every word before I spoke it. Not because I was afraid of Chloe, but because I needed to understand just how far things had gone. And more importantly, how far they were willing to go. I decided to invite them both to dinner. It wasn't unusual, I had always been the one to cook to gather us around the table. But this time, there was a purpose behind it. I wanted a conversation. A real one. Not the kind that gets brushed aside with polite smiles and vague reassurances. That afternoon, I made Ryan's favorite meal from childhood pot roast with carrots, mashed potatoes, and the apple pie David used to insist was better than anything from a bakery. I took my time with it, letting the familiar rhythm of cooking steady my thoughts. This was my house, my table, my family, and I deserved to be heard. By the time dinner was ready, I set the table carefully, 3 plates, 3 glasses, 3 folded napkins. Simple, intentional. But when I walked into the dining room, I stopped short. There were 6 plates on the table. For a moment, I thought I had made a mistake. But then I heard voices, unfamiliar voices coming from the living room. Laughter followed, loud and comfortable, like they belonged here. Chloe appeared in the doorway, dressed as if she were hosting a dinner party. "Oh, good. Everything smells amazing," she said brightly. "They're just finishing up a call." I asked, though I already knew the answer. "My parents." she said, as if it were obvious. I thought it would be nice to have everyone together. I stared at her. You invited them? I asked, keeping my voice as steady as I could. Of course, she replied, already turning away. It's just dinner. Just dinner. A few minutes later, George Bennett walked in, first followed by his wife, Sandra. George carried himself with the confidence of someone used to being in control, sharp suit-polished shoes, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Melissa, he said, extending his hand. Good to see you again. I shook it, though something about his grip felt deliberate, like a test. George, I replied. Sandra offered a polite smile, taking her seat without much conversation. Chloe moved around the table with ease, pouring drinks, adjusting chairs, completely at home in a space that once felt entirely mine. Ryan sat down last. He avoided my eyes. Dinner began with small talk, weather work, a few comments about the food. George complimented the roast. Sandra nodded politely. Chloe laughed at something Ryan said. On the surface, it looked like any ordinary family dinner, but underneath there was tension. I could feel it in the way Chloe watched me, in the way George leaned back in his chair, studying everything, waiting. I didn't want to wait any longer. I'd like to talk about something, I said, setting my fork down. The room quieted. Chloe glanced at Ryan, then back at me. Sure, she said, though her tone had shifted, slightly guarded. I took a breath. I think it's time we had a conversation about living arrangements, I began. It's been almost 2 years now, and I think we need to set some clear expectations moving forward. Ryan shifted in his seat. Chloe's smile faded. What kind of expectations? She asked. This is still my home, I said gently but firmly. And while I've been happy to help, I think it's reasonable to discuss a timeline for you both to move into your own place, or at the very least contribute more consistently to the household. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Chloe let out a small laugh. I'm sorry, she said, shaking her head slightly. I just didn't expect that. Expect what I asked? That you'd bring this up? Like this, she replied. In front of everyone. This affects everyone, I said. So yes, I thought it was appropriate. George cleared his throat. Well, Melissa, he said smoothly, from what I understand, Ryan and Chloe have been taking on quite a bit around here. Managing the house, keeping things running. It's not like they're doing nothing. I looked at him, surprised by the shift. I've been managing this house for over 30 years, I replied. I think I've been doing just fine. Chloe leaned forward slightly, her expression sharpening. No one is saying you haven't, she said. But things change. People change. And honestly, sometimes it feels like you're resisting that. Resisting what I asked, my voice tightening. Letting go, she said. The word hit me harder than I expected. I'm not trying to hold on to anything that isn't mine, I said carefully. I'm simply asking for respect in my own home. Chloe's eyes narrowed just slightly. We all live here now, she said. It's not just your space anymore. There it was again. Not just your space. I glanced at Ryan. Do you feel the same way? I asked him. He hesitated. I think we just want things to feel balanced, he said finally. Balanced. I felt something twist inside my chest. I've been paying for everything, I said quietly. The house, the bills, the groceries. What exactly are we balancing? Chloe's expression changed. The politeness disappeared. If you're unhappy, she said, her voice suddenly cold, then maybe you should consider what you actually want. I stared at her, unsure what she meant. What I want? I repeated. Yes, she said, leaning back in her chair, arms crossing. Because right now, it feels like you're making things uncomfortable for everyone else. Uncomfortable. In my own home. I'm asking for basic respect. I said, my voice shaking slightly, despite my effort to stay calm. And we're asking for space to live our lives, Chloe shot back. The room felt smaller, tighter. George watched silently, now his earlier charm gone. Sandra looked down at her plate. Ryan sat frozen, caught somewhere between us. And then Chloe said it. Clear, sharp, final. If you don't like living with us, then leave. The words hung in the air, heavier than anything that had been said all night. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I looked at Ryan, waiting, hoping for something. A protest? A correction? Anything. But he didn't speak. He just looked down, and in that silence, I understood everything. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping softly against the floor. No one moved. No one stopped me. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I didn't defend myself, because something inside me had already changed. I walked out of the dining room, leaving the untouched food, the half-filled glasses, and the illusion of family behind me. As I closed the door to my bedroom, my hands trembled, not from weakness, but from the weight of what I had just realized. They didn't see me as the owner of this home. They didn't see me as the one who built it. They didn't even see me as family. To them, I was just an obstacle. And for the first time, I stopped asking how to fix it and started wondering how to stop it. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. I sat on the edge of my bed long after the house went quiet, staring at the same photo of David I'd looked at countless times before. But this time, something felt different. For years, that picture had been a source of comfort, his steady smile reminding me I wasn't alone, even in the silence. Now, it felt like a question. What would you do, Mel? I rubbed my hands together, trying to steady them. Chloe's words kept replaying in my mind over and over again. If you don't like living with us, then leave. It wasn't just what she said. It was how easily she said it, how naturally it came to her, like she truly believed she had the right. And Ryan, my son, had sat there and said nothing. That silence hurt more than anything. But somewhere beneath the hurt, something else had taken root: clarity. For the first time, I stopped trying to excuse their behavior. I stopped telling myself that this was temporary, that they were just stressed, that things would go back to the way they used to be. They wouldn't, because this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a plan, and I needed to know exactly how far it went. Sometime past midnight, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Soft, careful. I held my breath. The house had that eerie stillness that only comes in the middle of the night, when every sound feels louder, every movement more deliberate. I stood slowly and moved toward my bedroom door, opening it just enough to peer into the hallway. The light in the living room was on. I stepped out quietly, my bare feet barely making a sound against the hardwood floor. As I moved closer, I could hear voices, low, urgent. Chloe and someone else. I edged closer, stopping just before the corner where the hallway opened into the living room. I didn't want to be seen. I just needed to listen. "We can't drag this out much longer," Chloe was saying. Her voice was sharper now, stripped of the polite tone she used during the day. A man's voice answered, firm, controlled. "George, she's already getting suspicious," he said. "You pushed too hard tonight," I had to, Chloe replied. "She keeps bringing up moving out timelines money. If we don't act soon, she's going to start digging." My heart began to pound. "She's not as clueless as you think," George continued. "We need to be careful. Everything has to be clean. Clean." I pressed my hand against the wall, steadying myself. "So what's the next step?" Chloe asked. A pause. Then George spoke again, quieter this time. "We move forward with the evaluation." My breath caught. Evaluation. "She's older, Chloe," he went on. "It's not hard to raise concerns. A few statements, a couple of documented incidents, maybe a doctor willing to sign off on cognitive decline. Once that's in place, we can petition for control. Control. Of what? No, not what. Of everything." "She's not going to agree to that," Chloe said. "She doesn't have to," George replied. "That's the point." The room went silent for a moment. Then Chloe spoke again, her voice lower now, almost thoughtful. "And the house. We handle that after," George said. "Once we establish authority, transferring ownership becomes much easier." My stomach dropped. There it was. The truth laid out plainly. This wasn't just about pushing me out. They were planning to take everything: the house, my savings, my life. I felt a wave of nausea rise, but I forced myself to stay still to keep listening. What about Ryan? Chloe asked. Another pause. He'll fall in line, George said dismissively. He always does. That hurt more than I expected. He just needs to believe it's for her own good. George continued. People accept a lot when you frame it as care. Care. I almost laughed if it hadn't felt so bitter. And if she resists? Chloe asked. George's answer was immediate. Then we make it look like she can't handle things on her own. Silence. Then Chloe exhaled slowly. Okay, she said. Let's do it. That was it. That was the moment everything inside me shifted completely. Not just suspicion, not just hurt. Understanding. I stepped back quietly, retreating down the hallway before they could notice me. My hands were shaking now, but my mind felt sharper than it had in years. They thought I was weak. They thought I was alone. They thought I wouldn't see it coming. They were wrong. I returned to my bedroom and closed the door gently behind me, leaning against it as my thoughts raced. An evaluation, a petition, control. I had seen cases like this before years ago when I worked in legal accounting. Families turning on each other using the system to strip someone of their rights under the guise of protection. It was rare, but when it happened, it was devastating. And now, it was happening to me. But they had made one critical mistake. They assumed I didn't understand. I moved quickly, pulling open the drawer of my nightstand and retrieving an old folder I hadn't touched in years. Inside were documents, records, contacts, notes from my previous work. Among them was a name I hadn't thought about in a long time. Linda Carter. She had been more than just a colleague. She had been a friend, someone I trusted, someone who knew exactly how these situations worked. I stared at her name for a long moment, then reached for my phone. It was late, far too late to call, but I didn't hesitate. If there was ever a time to break the rules, this was it. The phone rang twice before she answered, her voice groggy but alert. Melissa, she said, is everything okay? I swallowed, my voice steady, despite everything I had just heard. No, I said, but it will be. There was a pause. What's going on? I took a breath. I think my family is trying to take my house, I said. Silence. Then Linda's tone shifted completely. Tell me everything, she said. And for the first time that night, I didn't feel alone. Linda didn't interrupt me once. Not when my voice shook. Not when I had to pause to steady myself. Not even when I told her in as calm a tone as I could manage that my own son had been sitting quietly beside a plan to strip me of my rights and my home. She just listened. And somehow that made it easier to say everything out loud. When I finally finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear papers shifting, the faint creak of a chair, the quiet focus of someone already thinking several steps ahead. Melissa, Linda said at last, her voice now fully awake, sharp and steady. You did the right thing calling me, and I need you to listen carefully. I straightened slightly, gripping the phone tighter. I'm listening. What you're describing isn't just unethical, it could be criminal, depending on how far they've gone with documentation, she said. But more importantly, it's a situation that can escalate very quickly if we don't get ahead of it. I understand, I replied. Good. First question, whose name is on the deed of the house? Mine, I said immediately. After David passed, everything was transferred solely to me. There are no co-owners. Excellent, she said. That gives us a strong foundation. Foundation. The word felt grounding. Second, have you signed anything recently? Any documents Chloe or Ryan might have presented as routine? I hesitated for just a moment. No, I said carefully. Not yet. Good. Keep it that way, Linda said firmly. Do not sign anything, not even something that looks harmless. If they try to pressure you, stall. Say you need time. Say you don't understand. Whatever you need to do, just don't sign. I won't, I said. There was another pause, shorter this time. Now she continued, we need to start building a record. Evidence. Everything they say, everything they do, We document it. I leaned back against the headboard, absorbing her words. I heard them tonight, I said quietly. Chloe and her father. They were talking about an evaluation, about claiming I'm not capable. That tracks, Linda replied. It's a common tactic in cases like this. If they can establish cognitive decline, they can petition for guardianship or power of attorney. Once that happens, they could legally make decisions on your behalf, including financial ones. A chill ran through me. They think I'm vulnerable, I said. They're counting on it, Linda corrected. But here's the thing. They also need proof. Medical records, behavioral reports, something that convinces a court you're no longer competent. And I'm not giving them that, I said. Exactly, she said. Which means we stay one step ahead. I closed my eyes briefly, letting that idea settle. One step ahead. What do? I asked. Linda didn't hesitate. First, we secure your legal position, she said. I want you to come into my office tomorrow. We'll review your will, your assets, your medical directives, everything. We make sure it's airtight. Okay, I said. Second, she continued. We start gathering evidence. If you can legally install cameras in common areas of the house, do it. Not in private spaces, of course, but living room, kitchen entryways. Anywhere conversations might happen. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. I can do that. Good. And Melissa, be discreet. Don't let them know you're aware of what they're planning. That part was harder. I can try, I said. You can do it, she replied firmly. You've handled complex cases before. You know how to observe without reacting. She was right. Years ago, I had worked on cases where numbers told stories people tried to hide. Fraud, mismanagement, manipulation. It was all there buried under layers of paperwork and half-truths. My job had been to find the pattern, to see what others missed. And now, I needed to do that again. But this time it wasn't just business. It was personal. Third, Linda said, pulling me back into focus, we prepare for the possibility that they move forward with their plan. If they attempt to initiate an evaluation, I want us ready with independent medical assessments. Doctors who can confirm your cognitive health without bias. I've had my regular checkups, I said. Everything's been normal. Perfect, she said. We'll get those records, and we may arrange for an additional evaluation on our terms, not theirs. I exhaled slowly. For the first time since the dinner, I felt something I hadn't expected. Control. What about Ryan? I asked quietly. There was a brief pause. That's a separate issue, Linda said carefully. Legally, he has no claim unless you give it to him. Emotionally, that's something only you can decide how to handle. I looked down at my hands. He knew, I said. Maybe not everything, but enough. And he didn't stop it. I'm sorry, she said gently. I keep thinking. Maybe he's just being influenced, I continued. Maybe he doesn't realize how serious this is. Or maybe he does, Linda said, and he's choosing not to act. The words were blunt, but they were honest, and I needed that. I don't want to lose him, I admitted. I know, she said, but right now you need to focus on not losing yourself. That hit deeper than anything else she had said. Not losing myself. I understand, I said. Good, she replied. Because what they're trying to do isn't just about property, it's about control. And once someone takes that from you, it's very hard to get it back. Silence settled between us again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was purposeful. We're going to handle this, Linda said finally, step by step. But you need to stay calm, stay observant, and most importantly, stay consistent. No sudden changes in behavior that could be used against you. I can do that, I said. I know you can, she replied. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, the phone still in my hand. The house was quiet again, but it didn't feel the same. Before, the silence had felt like loneliness. Now it felt like preparation. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark yard David and I had once stood in together, imagining a future that felt so far away now. They think I'm weak, I whispered. The words didn't sting anymore. They clarified. I turned back toward the room, my mind already moving through the next steps, what I needed to gather, what I needed to protect, what I needed to watch. For years, I had been patient, understanding, forgiving. But those qualities didn't mean I was powerless. They meant I had chosen peace. Until now. And now I was choosing something else. Not anger, not revenge, but strength. Quiet, calculated, unshakable. They wanted control. They wanted my home. They wanted my life. But they had underestimated one very important thing. I wasn't just a mother. I wasn't just a widow. I was someone who knew exactly how to read between the lines. And this time, I was the one writing the ending. The next morning, I moved like nothing had changed. That was the hardest part. Not the fear, not the anger, but the acting. I woke up at the same time, made coffee in the same chipped mug David had loved, and stood by the same kitchen window, watching the early Ohio light settle across the yard. My hands were steady now, my breathing even. If anyone had looked at me, they would have seen the same quiet, predictable Melissa Walker they had been slowly pushing aside. That was exactly what I needed them to see. Chloe came downstairs first, her footsteps light but purposeful. She was already dressed, phone in hand, scrolling as she walked into the kitchen. "Morning," she said, barely glancing at me. "Good morning," I replied calmly. She poured herself coffee without asking, using the last of the fresh pot I had just made. A small thing. It used to bother me. Now it was just data. Ryan came down a few minutes later, rubbing his eyes, his expression still soft from sleep. "Morning, Mom," he said. "Morning," I replied, watching him carefully. There was something in his face, something uncertain, like he wanted to say something, but didn't know how. For a moment I wondered if last night had affected him more than he let on. But then Chloe spoke. "We should talk about that paperwork today," she said casually, setting her mug down. Ryan's shoulders tightened almost imperceptibly. "Yeah," he said. "We should." I kept my expression neutral. "What paperwork?" I asked. Chloe turned toward me, her smile easy rehearsed. "Just some documents to help streamline things around the house," she said. "Nothing complicated. It'll make managing bills and maintenance easier for everyone." There it was. The first move. I nodded slowly, as if considering it. "That sounds helpful," I said. "But I'd like to take a look at everything carefully first. Maybe even have someone review it with me." Chloe's smile flickered. "It's really straightforward," she said quickly. "There's no need to involve anyone else." "I'm sure it is," I replied gently. "But I've always been careful with documents. Old habit." Ryan shifted again, glancing between us. "Mom's always been like that," he said, trying to ease the tension. "It's fine." Chloe didn't respond right away. Instead, she picked up her phone again, tapping the screen a little harder than necessary. "Fine," she said finally. "Just don't take too long." I nodded as if that were perfectly reasonable. Inside, I felt something settle into place. They were moving faster now, which meant I needed to move faster too. After breakfast, I left the house under the pretense of running errands. In reality, I drove straight to a small electronics store, a few towns over, far enough that I wouldn't run into anyone I knew. I took my time browsing, asking questions, choosing carefully. The cameras I selected were discreet, small wireless, designed for home security. Nothing invasive, just enough to capture what I needed in the shared spaces. The living room, the kitchen, the main entryway, all areas where conversations happened, all areas where plans might be revealed. By the time I returned home, Chloe was out, and Ryan had retreated to the guest room he had turned into his office. The house was quiet, perfect. I moved quickly but methodically, installing each camera with the precision I hadn't used in years, but hadn't forgotten. I tested angles, checked audio, made sure everything blended naturally into the environment. By the time I was done, nothing looked different. But everything had changed. That evening, Chloe returned with a folder in her hand. Got everything ready, she said, placing it on the kitchen counter. I glanced at it briefly. I'll look it over tonight, I said. She nodded, but her eyes stayed on me a moment longer than usual. Watching, measuring. That was fine. Let her watch. I had nothing to hide. Not anymore. After dinner, simple quiet with none of the forced warmth from the night before, I took the folder to my room. I closed the door behind me and sat at the desk David had once used, opening the documents slowly. At first glance, they looked harmless. Forms, authorization slips, routine language, but the more I read, the clearer it became. This wasn't about convenience, it was about control. Buried in the wording were clauses that would grant Ryan, and by extension Chloe, access to my financial accounts, authority to make decisions on my behalf, the ability to assist in managing my assets if I were deemed unable to do so myself. It was subtle, carefully constructed, and incredibly dangerous. I felt a cold anger rise in my chest, not explosive, not overwhelming, but steady, focused. They had really thought this through, but they had also underestimated me. I reached for my phone and took pictures of every page, sending them directly to Linda. Within minutes, my phone buzzed. Do not sign anything, her message read. These documents are exactly what we expected. I'll go over them in detail tomorrow. I set the phone down, staring at the papers in front of me. For a moment, I imagined what would have happened if I hadn't listened at the door the night before. If I had trusted them, if I had signed without question, how easily everything could have been taken. How quietly. I closed the folder and leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This wasn't even just manipulation. This was a calculated attempt to strip me of my independence, and they thought I would walk right into it. I stood up and walked to the mirror, studying my reflection. I looked the same. Same gray hair, same lined face, same woman they had been dismissing for months. But behind my eyes, something had changed. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was preparing. The next morning, Chloe asked about the papers almost immediately. Did you get a chance to look at them? She said, her tone light but expectant. I did, I replied. And she asked, I think they're very thorough, I said carefully. She smiled, relieved. Great, she said. So we can go ahead and… But I'm not ready to sign anything yet, I added. The smile disappeared. What do you mean, she asked. I mean, I'd like to take a little more time, I said. Maybe have them reviewed just to be safe. There's nothing unsafe about them, she said, her voice tightening. I'm sure there isn't, I replied calmly. But it's important to me. Ryan stepped in quickly. It's okay, he said. We're not in a rush. Chloe turned toward him, her frustration barely contained. We are in a rush, she said under her breath. I pretended not to hear. I appreciate your effort, I said to her. Truly. But I'll let you know when I'm ready. There was a long pause. Then Chloe nodded once. Fine, she said. But don't take too long. Again, that same phrase. As if time was something they needed to control. As if something was coming. I watched her walk away, her posture stiff, her movements sharper than before. She knew something had shifted. She just didn't know what. And that was exactly where I needed her to be. Uncertain. Because while she was trying to tighten her grip, I was already setting the trap. For the next few days, I became very good at being invisible. Not physically. Chloe and Ryan still saw me every morning, still passed me in the hallway, still heard the soft sounds of my routines. But emotionally, I faded into the background of their attention. I didn't argue, I didn't question, I didn't react. And because of that, they stopped watching me as closely. That was exactly what I needed. The cameras were working. Every evening, once the house settled into its nighttime rhythm, I would sit quietly in my bedroom with my laptop open, reviewing the recordings. At first, it felt strange watching my own home from a distance, seeing conversations unfold in rooms I had once moved through freely. But that feeling didn't last long, because what I saw confirmed everything. Chloe had started making more calls. She didn't always step outside anymore. Sometimes she stayed in the living room, pacing slowly, her voice low, but clear enough for the cameras to capture. "I told you we're close," she said one afternoon, her tone tight with impatience. "She's hesitating, but she'll come around." A pause. "No, she hasn't signed yet," she added, "but she's not pushing back hard either. I think she just needs a little more pressure." Pressure. The word made my jaw tighten. Later that same day, George came over. I watched the footage from the living room as he stepped inside, carrying a leather folder under his arm. Chloe greeted him immediately, closing the door behind him with more care than usual. They didn't notice the small black lens tucked into the corner of the bookshelf. "She's stalling," Chloe said as soon as they sat down. "That's expected," George replied calmly. "People like her always stall when they start to feel something slipping." Something slipping. I leaned closer to the screen. "We need to escalate," Chloe continued. "I don't want to drag this out another month." George nodded slowly. "Then we move to the next phase," he said. "Have you documented anything?" "Not yet," Chloe admitted. "She's been normal." "Then we make something," he said simply. I felt a cold wave pass through me. "Make something." "You mean incidents?" Chloe asked. "Exactly," George said. "Confusion, forgetfulness, maybe a missed bill, a misplaced item. It doesn't take much. Once we have a pattern, we can justify the evaluation." And Ryan Chloe asked. George's expression didn't change. "He'll support whatever you present to him," he said. "Frame it as concern. Say you're worried about her safety. He won't question it." I paused the video. My hands were steady, but my chest felt tight. This wasn't just planning anymore. This was execution. They were actively preparing to fabricate evidence, turning ordinary moments into signs of decline, twisting reality into something that could be used against me. And Ryan, he was still part of it. Maybe not intentionally, maybe not fully, but he was there. And that mattered. I resumed the video. Chloe leaned back on the couch, exhaling slowly. "I just want this done," she said. "I'm tired of pretending." "Then stop pretending," George replied. "But be smart about it." There was a knock at the door. Ryan entered the room, glancing between them. "Hey," he said. "Everything okay?" Chloe smiled instantly, her tone softening. "Yeah, just talking logistics," she said. "About what he asked?" "About helping your mom," she said gently. "We're just trying to figure out the best way to support her long term." Ryan nodded, though something in his expression shifted. Uncertainty. "Maybe." "That's good," he said. "She's been different lately." Different. The word echoed in my mind. Chloe tilted her head slightly. "How so?" she asked. Ryan hesitated. "I don't know," he said. "Just quieter, more distant." George spoke before Chloe could. "That's often the first sign," he said calmly. "Withdrawal." Ryan frowned slightly. "Really? Absolutely," George said. "It's nothing to panic about, but it's something to monitor." I stopped the video again. There it was. The narrative, subtle, convincing, and already beginning to take shape. They weren't just planning to act against me. They were shaping how others, especially Ryan, would perceive me, turning my silence into evidence, my caution into suspicion. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the paused image of the three of them sitting in my living room. For a moment, I felt something close to grief, not just for what they were doing, but for what we had lost. Ryan used to trust me, used to come to me with questions, with doubts, with problems he couldn't solve on his own. Now, he was listening to someone else explain who I was, and he was starting to believe it. I closed my eyes briefly, letting the feeling pass. I couldn't afford to stay there. Not now. Not when everything was finally becoming clear. The next morning, I made a small change. Just one. I misplaced my keys. Not accidentally. Deliberately. I left them in the kitchen drawer instead of the hook by the door, then walked into the living room where Chloe was sitting with her laptop. "Have you seen my keys?" I asked, keeping my tone light. Chloe looked up, her eyes sharpening just slightly. Didn't you have them earlier? She asked. I thought so, I said, glancing around as if confused. I must have set them down somewhere. She stood up immediately. I'll help you look, she said. Of course she would. We searched together for a few minutes, Chloe watching me more than the room. Where did you last have them? She asked. I'm not sure, I replied, letting a hint of uncertainty creep into my voice. She found them within seconds in the drawer where I had placed them. Oh, she said, holding them up. They were right here. I smiled a little sheepish. Well, I guess I'm getting forgetful, I said lightly. Her expression changed. Not concern, not kindness, recognition. She nodded slowly. It happens, she said. But there was something else in her eyes now, something calculating. I took the keys from her, thanking her, then walked away without another word. That afternoon, I checked the camera footage again. Chloe was on the phone. You were right, she said quietly. It's starting. A pause. No, nothing major, she continued. Just small things, but it's enough. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. They thought they were building a case. They thought they were collecting evidence. What they didn't realize was that I was letting them, every word, every assumption, every step they took, was being recorded, documented, preserved, not as proof of my decline, but as proof of their intent. I closed the laptop and sat there in the quiet of my room, the house around me filled with people who believed they were in control. For the first time since all of this began, I felt something close to certainty. They had made their move. Now it was my turn. And I wasn't going to stop them. Not yet. Because sometimes the strongest position isn't stopping the plan. It's letting it unfold, just long enough to expose everything. The day they tried to move me out of my own house started like any other. That was the unsettling part. The morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, just as it always had. The coffee tasted the same. The air carried that familiar, quiet hum of routine. If someone had walked in from the outside, they would have seen nothing unusual. But I felt it. That shift. That quiet tension beneath the surface. Chloe was already dressed when I came downstairs, hair perfectly styled, makeup, done wearing a fitted blazer that suggested she had somewhere important to be. She wasn't scrolling on her phone like usual. She wasn't distracted. She was focused. Ryan sat at the table staring into his coffee, his hands wrapped tightly around the mug. He didn't look up when I entered. Morning, I said. Chloe turned immediately. Good morning, she replied, her tone overly pleasant. Too pleasant. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down across from them. No one spoke for a few seconds. Then Chloe glanced at Ryan. He cleared his throat. Mom, we need to talk, he said. I nodded slowly, as if I had no idea what was coming. Of course, I said. Chloe stepped in before he could continue. We've been thinking a lot about what's best for you. She began folding her hands neatly on the table. There it was. The script. I appreciate that, I said calmly. What have you come up with? Ryan finally looked at me, his expression strained. We think it might be time for you to consider a different living arrangement, he said. The words were careful, measured, practiced. I tilted my head slightly. A different arrangement, I repeated. Chloe nodded, her voice soft, almost sympathetic. Somewhere that can better support you, she said. Someplace with more structure, more assistance. Assistance. I took a sip of my coffee, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make them uncomfortable. I see, I said. And where exactly do you suggest I go? Chloe reached into her bag and pulled out a brochure, sliding it across the table toward me. A senior living community, she said. It's very nice. Safe. Comfortable. I didn't touch the brochure. Instead, I looked at Ryan. Is this what you want? I asked. He hesitated. I just want you to be okay, he said. The answer I expected. The answer that said nothing. I am okay, I replied gently. Chloe leaned forward slightly, her patience already thinning. You've been forgetting things, she said. Misplacing items. getting confused. I met her gaze evenly. Everyone forgets things, I said. Not like this, she replied quickly. Ryan nodded as if reinforcing her words. It's been happening more? He added. I studied his face. There was doubt there, but there was also something else. Fear, not for me, of losing control of the situation they had created. I think you're overreacting, I said calmly. Chloe exhaled sharply. We're trying to help you, she said. And I'm telling you, I don't need that kind of help, I replied. The room went quiet again. Then Chloe's tone changed, less soft, more firm. Well, she said, we've already made arrangements. I felt something inside me go still. What kind of arrangements? I asked. Before she could answer, there was a knock at the door. 3 sharp, deliberate knocks. Chloe stood immediately. They're here, she said. Ryan froze. I remained seated. Chloe walked to the door and opened it, stepping aside as 2 men entered, followed by a woman carrying a clipboard. The men wore uniforms. Moving company. The woman looked professional, mid-40s, composed, observant. Not a nurse, not a doctor. Something else. Good morning, the woman said, her voice polite but distant. I'm here to assist with the transition. Transition. I slowly stood up. Transition to what I asked. Chloe closed the door behind them. To your new living situation, she said. The movers began to look around, assessing the space. Ryan stood up quickly. Maybe we should slow down, he said. Talk this through. Chloe shot him a look. We've already talked about this, she said. I looked at the woman with the clipboard. And you are? I asked. Case coordinator, she replied. We've been informed that you'll be relocating today for your safety and well-being. Informed. By whom? I turned back to Chloe. You arranged this without my consent, I said. It's for your own good, she replied. George's words echoed in my mind. Frame it as care. I took a step forward. I am not going anywhere. I said, my voice calm but firm. Chloe's expression hardened. Melissa, please don't make this difficult, she said. This is my home, I replied. You don't have the authority to remove me. The woman with the clipboard glanced at Chloe. Chloe hesitated. Just for a second. That was all I needed. Actually, I said, reaching into my pocket, I think we should clarify a few things. I pulled out my phone. Chloe's eyes narrowed. What are you doing? She asked. Making sure everyone here understands the situation, I said. And right on cue, there was another knock at the door. Louder this time. More official. Chloe turned, confusion flashing across her face. I walked past her and opened the door. Standing there were 2 police officers, and beside them, Linda Carter. Calm, composed, prepared. Good morning, she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. The room shifted instantly. The movers froze. The case coordinator straightened. Chloe's confidence faltered. What is this? She demanded. Linda didn't look at her. She looked at me. Are you all right? She asked. I nodded. I am now. She turned to the officers. This is Ms. Melissa Walker, she said clearly, the sole legal owner of this property. We have reason to believe there has been an attempt to remove her from her home without legal authority. The officers stepped forward. Chloe's voice rose. That's not true. We're helping her. Linda held up a hand. I would strongly advise you to stop speaking, she said. Silence fell. Heavy. Unavoidable. I stood there watching as everything they had planned began to unravel. Not with shouting, not with chaos, but with something far more powerful. Truth. And for the first time since Chloe had told me to leave, I realized something. I wasn't the one being pushed out anymore. They were. For a moment, no one moved. It was as if the entire room had been frozen in place. Every plan, every assumption, every carefully constructed lie, suspended in midair, waiting to collapse under its own weight. Chloe was the first to recover. This is ridiculous. She snapped, her voice sharper than I had ever heard it. We're trying to help her, and now you bring the police into it. Linda didn't flinch. She stepped further into the living room, her presence calm, but commanding the kind that didn't need to raise its voice to be heard. No one is accusing you of helping, Linda said evenly. We're questioning the legality of what you're attempting to do. The two officers exchanged a glance before one of them spoke. Ma'am, he said, addressing Chloe, we need to understand what's going on here. Were you planning to move Ms. Walker out of this residence today? Chloe hesitated, only for a second, but it was enough. We made arrangements for her relocation, she said carefully. She's been showing signs of cognitive decline, and we're acting in her best interest. The officer nodded slowly. And do you have legal documentation authorizing that action, he asked. Chloe's jaw tightened. We're in the process of obtaining it, she replied. That's not what I asked, he said calmly. Do you have it right now, Silence? I watched Ryan. He stood near the table, his hands trembling slightly, his eyes darting between Chloe the officers and Linda. For the first time since all of this began, he looked lost. No, Chloe admitted finally. The word hung in the air. Simple. Damaging. Final. Linda stepped forward, placing a folder on the coffee table with deliberate precision. Officer, this property is legally owned solely by my client, Melissa Walker, she said. We have the deed financial records and updated legal documentation to confirm her full control and capacity. She opened the folder, sliding the documents forward. The officer leaned down, scanning them carefully. Meanwhile, the second officer turned toward the movers. Gentlemen, he said, I'm going to ask you to hold off on any further action until we sort this out. The movers didn't argue. They stepped back immediately, their earlier confidence replaced with quiet uncertainty. The woman with the clipboard shifted her weight. I was informed this was a voluntary relocation, she said, her tone now cautious. It is not, I said clearly. She nodded once, closing her folder. Then I'll need to withdraw from this assignment, she said, stepping back toward the door. Just like that. One piece of Chloe's plan, gone. Chloe turned sharply toward me. You're making a mistake, she said, her voice low but intense. This is exactly the kind of behavior we were worried about. I met her gaze without hesitation. No, I said calmly. This is exactly the kind of behavior you were hoping for. Her expression faltered, only slightly, but I saw it. Linda stepped in again. In fact, she said, we have reason to believe there has been an attempt to manipulate circumstances in order to justify a false claim of incapacity. Chloe let out a short, incredulous laugh. That's absurd, she said. You have no proof of that. I reached into my pocket again. This time my hand didn't shake. I do, I said. Every eye in the room turned toward me. I walked over to the television and connected my phone, the screen flickering to life a moment later. The first video began to play. Chloe, George, sitting in this very room. Okay, we can't drag this out much longer. The sound filled the space, clear, undeniable. I watched Chloe's face as the realization hit her. Her confidence cracked. Not completely, but enough. That she started. But Linda cut her off. Let it play, she said. The conversation continued. We move forward with the evaluation. Once we establish authority, transferring ownership becomes much easier. The room felt smaller with every word. Ryan's face went pale. He took a step back, shaking his head slightly. What is this? He whispered. I didn't look at him. Not yet. I kept my focus on the truth unfolding in front of everyone. When the video ended, the silence that followed was heavier than anything that had come before. Chloe's composure shattered. This is taken out of context, she said quickly. You don't understand what you're hearing. I understand it perfectly, Linda replied. The officer straightened his expression, now more serious. Ma'am, he said to Chloe, this raises some concerns. Chloe turned toward him, desperation creeping into her voice. We were trying to protect her, she insisted. She's not capable of managing things on her own anymore. That's not supported by what we're seeing, he said. Ryan finally spoke again. Chloe, what is this? He asked, his voice strained. She looked at him, searching for something support, validation, anything. It's not what it looks like, she said. It looks like you were planning to take control of my mother's house, he said. The words came out sharper than I expected. And for the first time, Ryan wasn't defending her. He was questioning her. Chloe's eyes flickered. Ryan listened to me. No, he said, stepping back. You listen. Did you plan this? She hesitated. And in that hesitation, he got his answer. George wasn't there to smooth things over this time. There was no calm voice guiding the narrative. Just Chloe. Alone. Exposed. I stepped forward, then my voice steady. This is my home, I said, and I am fully capable of making my own decisions. I did not agree to leave. I did not authorize any of this. The officer nodded. Understood, he said. He turned back to Chloe. I'm going to need you to cease any further action related to this matter, he said. If there are additional legal concerns, they can be addressed through proper channels. Chloe opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. For the first time since she had walked into my life, she had no control over the situation. The movers began to gather their things, quietly, quickly. The woman with the clipboard slipped out the door without another word. And Ryan? He stood there staring at the screen, as if trying to piece together how everything had unraveled so completely. I looked at him then, really looked at him. And for a moment I saw the boy he used to be. Confused, hurt, lost. But I also saw the man he had become, someone who had stood by and said nothing. Mom, he started. But I held up a hand. Not in anger, not in rejection. Just enough. Not now, I said, because this wasn't over. Not yet. What had just happened was only the beginning. They had tried to take my home. Now, they were going to face the consequences. After the officers left, the house didn't feel quieter. It felt exposed, like a stage after the curtains have fallen. Props still scattered, the truth still hanging in the air, undeniable and heavy. Chloe stood near the doorway, arms crossed tightly, her composure barely holding together. Ryan remained by the table, staring down at the empty coffee cup in front of him, as if it might offer answers he couldn't find anywhere else. Linda closed her folder slowly, then turned to me. Do you want me to stay? She asked gently. I shook my head. No, I said. I think I need to handle this part myself. She studied my face for a moment, then nodded. You know where to find me, she said. I walked her to the door, watching as she stepped out into the late morning light. For a brief second, I felt that flicker of uncertainty again, standing on the edge of something final. But then I closed the door and turned back. Chloe spoke first. You really went all out, didn't you? She said, her tone sharp, defensive. Cameras, lawyers, police. Yes, I said simply. She let out a short, disbelieving laugh. For what she demanded. To prove that we were trying to help you, I met her gaze calm and unwavering. No, I said. To prove that you were trying to control me. Her expression hardened. You're twisting everything, she snapped. You've been acting strange for weeks. Forgetting things, isolating yourself. I misplaced my keys once I interrupted. On purpose. The words landed like a crack in the room. Chloe blinked. What I wanted to see how you'd react, I said. I wanted to see how quickly you'd turn a small moment into something bigger. Ryan looked up sharply. You did that on purpose? He asked. Yes, I said, finally turning to him, because I needed to understand what was really happening in this house. He shook his head slowly, confusion giving way to something else, realization. Chloe stepped forward. That doesn't prove anything, she said. You're manipulating the situation. No, I said firmly. You were. The silence that followed was different this time. Less chaotic, more final. I took a breath, steadying myself. I'm going to make this very clear, I said. You both have 72 hours to leave this house. Ryan froze. What he said. Chloe stared at me. You can't be serious, she said. I am, I replied. This is my home. You are here by my permission. And that permission has been withdrawn. Ryan stepped forward, his voice rising. Mom, you can't just throw us out, I can, I said calmly. And I am. His face flushed. Where are we supposed to go? He demanded. I felt the question hit me, but I didn't let it shake me. That's something you should have thought about before trying to take this house from me, I said. Chloe scoffed. This is unbelievable, she said. After everything we've done for you. Stop, I said sharply. The word cut through the room. You don't get to rewrite this, I continued, my voice steady but firm. You didn't take care of me. You didn't support me. You lived here in my home on my money while planning how to remove me from it. Chloe opened her mouth, closed it. For once, she had no immediate response. I turned to Ryan. And you, I said quietly. He looked at me, his expression shifting, defensive, ashamed, uncertain. I didn't know everything, he said quickly. I swear, Mom, I didn't. You knew enough, I said. The words were softer than anything I had said so far, but they carried more weight. I heard you? I continued. I saw the videos. You were there. You didn't stop it. I thought. He hesitated, struggling. I thought we were just trying to help, Chloe said. Chloe said a lot of things, I replied. But you're not a child, Ryan. You're a grown man, and you made a choice. He looked down. The silence stretched between us, filled with everything that had gone unsaid for too long. I never wanted to hurt you, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I felt something tighten in my chest. I believe that, I said. And I did. That was the hardest part. Chloe crossed her arms again, her frustration boiling over. This is ridiculous, she said. You're blowing everything out of proportion. We made a few plans, so what? That doesn't give you the right to destroy our lives. I looked at her. Really looked at her. For the first time, I didn't see confidence. I saw desperation. This isn't about destroying your life, I said. It's about protecting mine. She shook her head. You're overreacting, she insisted. No, I said quietly. I'm responding. Another silence. Then I continued. I'm also cutting off all financial support, I said. Effective immediately. Ryan's head snapped up. What he said. The car insurance I went on. The credit card. The shared accounts. The grocery expenses. All of it. It ends today. You can't just... He started. I can, I said. Because it was never your money to begin with. Chloe stepped forward, anger flashing in her eyes. You're going to regret this, she said. You think you can just throw us out and walk away like nothing happened. I'm not walking away, I replied. I'm standing my ground. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Fine, she said. If that's how you want to play this, we'll take it to court. Ryan looked at her, startled. Chloe. No, she said, cutting him off. She wants to make this ugly. We can make it ugly. I didn't react. I had expected this. You're free to pursue whatever legal action you think is appropriate, I said calmly. Her eyes narrowed. You don't think we will? I think you will, I said. And I think you'll lose? That was the moment her confidence cracked again. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, pacing now. This isn't how this was supposed to go, he muttered. I watched him, a mixture of sadness and clarity settling over me. No, I said quietly. It's not. Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being about helping and became something else entirely. Control, power, entitlement, and now, consequences. I stepped back, giving them space, not out of weakness, but because the boundary had been drawn. 72 hours, I said again. After that, I'll take further steps. Ryan stopped pacing. Chloe didn't respond. They both just stood there, facing a reality they hadn't planned for. For the first time since they moved into this house, they weren't in control anymore, and neither was I. But I wasn't trying to control anything. I was simply reclaiming what was already mine. Chloe didn't wait the full 72 hours to escalate. She waited 24. That alone told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't about reflection. It wasn't about reconsidering what had happened or trying to repair what was left of the family. It was about regaining control fast, aggressively, and publicly if necessary. The envelope arrived the next afternoon. Certified mail. I was in the kitchen when the knock came. Ryan was upstairs packing. I assumed, though, I hadn't gone to check. Chloe had left earlier that morning without saying a word. When I opened the door and saw the courier holding out the envelope, I didn't feel fear. I felt confirmation. "Melissa Walker?" he asked. "Yes," I said. I signed, took the envelope, and closed the door quietly behind me. For a moment, I just stood there holding it. Then I walked to the dining table, the same table where everything had shifted just days before, and sat down. I opened it carefully. Inside were legal documents, a petition, exactly as Linda had predicted. I read through the pages slowly, my eyes moving over the carefully worded claims. Concern for my well-being, allegations of cognitive decline, instances of forgetfulness, minor exaggerated, reframed into something more serious. And there it was, a formal request for a court-ordered evaluation. My hands didn't shake. Not this time. I reached for my phone and called Linda immediately. "She filed?" I said as soon as she answered. "I assumed she would," Linda replied. "What does it say?" I summarized the key points, reading directly from the document. When I finished, Linda let out a quiet breath. "All right," she said. "This is exactly what we prepared for." I leaned back in my chair. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now," she said, "we respond." Her voice was calm, precise, controlled. The same tone she had used in courtrooms in negotiations, in situations where everything depended on clarity and timing. "I'll file a motion to challenge the petition," she continued. "We'll include the evidence you've gathered, the recordings, the documentation, everything. We'll also submit your medical records and arrange for an independent evaluation from a trusted specialist." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. "And Ryan?" I asked quietly. There was a brief pause. "He may be called to testify," she said, "especially if his name is included in the petition." I closed my eyes for a moment. "I don't want to destroy him," I said. "You're not," Linda replied. "You're protecting yourself. What he does from here is his responsibility." I knew she was right, but knowing that didn't make it easier. That evening, Ryan came downstairs. He looked tired. More than tired, actually. Drained. Like the weight of everything that had happened was finally catching up to him. He stood in the doorway for a moment before speaking. "I didn't know she filed," he said. I looked up from the papers in front of me. "I believe you," I said. He seemed surprised by that. "You do?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. "I think you've been reacting, not leading." He stepped further into the room, running a hand through his hair. "She said it was just a precaution," he said, "that it would help make things official." "Official," I repeated. The word felt hollow now. "I didn't think it would go this far," he added. I studied him for a moment. "Ryan," I said gently, "it was always going to go this far." He shook his head. "No," he said. "I would have stopped it if I knew you had chances," I said, not harshly. Just honestly. He looked down. "I know," he whispered. The silence between us stretched, filled with everything that couldn't be undone. "I don't want to fight you," he said after a moment. "I don't want to fight you either," I replied. "But I will defend myself." He nodded slowly. "I understand." For the first time since all of this began, there was no argument in his voice. No defensiveness. Just acceptance. "What happens now?" he asked. "There will be a hearing," I said. "Your wife is asking the court to evaluate my mental capacity." He winced at the word wife. "I didn't agree to that," he said. "You didn't stop it," I replied. He flinched slightly. I know, he said again. Another silence. Then he looked at me, his expression uncertain. Do you want me to testify? He asked. The question caught me off guard. Not because I hadn't considered it, but because I hadn't expected him to offer. I want you to tell the truth, I said. He nodded. I can do that, he said. I believed him, but belief didn't erase what had already happened. The next few days moved quickly. Linda filed the response, attaching everything we had gathered: video recordings, transcripts, financial documents, medical records. Each piece of evidence was carefully organized, presented with precision. There was no room for ambiguity, no room for interpretation, just facts. Chloe, on the other hand, doubled down. Through her attorney, she submitted additional statements, more claims, more concerns, more attempts to frame me as someone who needed intervention. But the difference was clear. Her case was built on narrative. Ours was built on proof. The day of the preliminary hearing arrived faster than I expected. The courtroom was smaller than I had imagined, quiet, orderly, almost detached from the intensity of what it represented. Chloe sat across from me, her posture rigid, her expression controlled. George sat beside her, his presence less confident than before, but still composed. Ryan sat behind them, not beside them. That alone said something. Linda stood next to me, reviewing her notes one last time. Stay calm, she said quietly. Answer clearly. Don't let them provoke you. I nodded. I won't. The judge entered and the room rose. As we sat back down, I felt something settle inside me. Not fear, not anger, but clarity. This was no longer happening in whispers behind closed doors. It was out in the open now, where it belonged. Chloe's attorney spoke first, outlining their concerns, carefully phrased professionally, delivered designed to sound reasonable. But as he spoke, I could feel the weakness in it, because I knew what was coming next. Linda stood when it was her turn, and when she began to speak, everything shifted. She didn't argue emotionally. She didn't raise her voice. She simply presented the truth, document by document, video by video, word by word. And as the evidence unfolded, I watched Chloe's expression change, from confidence to tension, to something else entirely, something she hadn't expected. For the first time, she wasn't controlling the narrative, she was inside it, and it was collapsing around her. I had always imagined that if I ever found myself in a courtroom, it would feel overwhelming, intimidating even. But as I sat there listening to Linda present the truth, piece by piece, I felt something entirely different. Grounded. Every document she laid out, every recording she referenced, every timeline she built, it wasn't just evidence. It was my life. Clarified, defended, protected. Chloe's attorney tried to interrupt more than once, objecting to tone, to interpretation, to the intent behind certain recordings. But the judge remained patient, methodical, allowing Linda to continue as long as everything remained relevant and factual. And it did. That was the difference. Linda wasn't telling a story. She was revealing one. Your Honor, she said, her voice steady, the petitioner claims concern over Ms. Walker's cognitive decline. However, what we have presented clearly demonstrates a coordinated effort to fabricate that very decline in order to gain control over her assets. The judge leaned forward slightly, reviewing the documents in front of him. Chloe shifted in her seat. George's expression tightened. This is speculation, Chloe's attorney said quickly. There is no direct proof of intent to commit fraud. Linda didn't hesitate. There is, she said. She pressed a button on the small device in front of her. The audio began. Once we establish authority, transferring ownership becomes much easier. George's voice, clear, undeniable. The courtroom fell silent. I didn't look at Chloe. I didn't need to. I could feel it. That shift. The moment when control slips away. The audio continued. We need to escalate. Make something. Confusion. Forgetfulness. It doesn't take much. Each word landed heavier than the last. When the recording ended, Linda didn't speak immediately. She let the silence do its work. Then she stepped back. "That is not concern," she said. "That is strategy." Chloe's attorney stood again, more forceful this time. "This recording lacks context," he argued. "We don't know the full nature of the conversation." "Then perhaps the court would benefit from the full video," Linda replied calmly. Chloe's head snapped up. "No," she said suddenly. The word came out too fast, too sharp. Everyone turned toward her. Her attorney placed a hand on her arm, trying to steady the situation. "Chloe," he said quietly, but it was too late. The reaction had already spoken for her. The judge looked at her for a long moment, then turned back to Linda. "I think what we've heard is sufficient for now," he said. Linda nodded. "Thank you, Your Honor." Then he looked at me. "Ms. Walker," he said, "I'd like to ask you a few questions." I straightened slightly. "Of course. Do you feel that you are capable of managing your own finances and personal affairs?" he asked. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Have you experienced any recent confusion, memory loss, or difficulty in handling daily tasks?" "No," I replied. He studied me for a moment. "Are you currently under the care of a physician for any cognitive concerns?" Numbers now. Linda stepped forward slightly. "Your Honor, we've submitted recent medical evaluations, confirming Ms. Walker's full cognitive capacity," she added. The judge nodded, reviewing the documents. Then he turned toward Chloe. "Ms. Walker, Chloe Walker," he corrected. "Glancing at the file, you've made serious claims regarding your mother-in-law's mental state. Based on what has been presented today, I'm not seeing sufficient evidence to support those claims." Chloe's posture stiffened. "With all due respect, Your Honor," she said, "you're only seeing one side of this. She's been acting differently, withdrawn, forgetful, which, according to the evidence the judge interrupted, may have been misinterpreted or even influenced by your own actions." Chloe fell silent. George leaned in slightly, whispering something to her. But whatever confidence he was trying to give her, it wasn't enough. The judge continued. "At this time, I find no basis to proceed with a court-ordered evaluation," he said. "The petition is denied." The words echoed in the room. Denied. Just like that. Chloe's face drained of color. Her attorney tried to respond, but the judge raised a hand. Furthermore, he added, "Based on the material presented, I am referring this matter for further review regarding potential misconduct." That was the moment everything truly shifted. Not just for me. For them. George's expression changed completely. No longer controlled, no longer confident. Concern. Real, visible concern. Chloe looked at him, panic flickering in her eyes. "This isn't over," she said under her breath, but it sounded less like a threat and more like fear. The judge closed the file. "This hearing is concluded," he said, and just like that, it was done. As we stood, I felt something lift from my chest, not relief exactly, but something close. Validation, not because I had won, but because the truth had been seen. Ryan approached me slowly as we stepped out into the hallway. "Mom," he began. I turned to him. He looked different. Not just tired, changed. "I didn't know it was that bad," he said. "I didn't know they were planning all of that." I believed him, but belief didn't erase responsibility. "You know now," I said. He nodded. "I want to fix this," he said. I looked at him for a long moment. "I don't know if it can be fixed," I said honestly. His face fell. "But I know this," I continued. "It can't be ignored anymore." He swallowed. "I understand." Chloe walked past us, then her movements sharp, her eyes avoiding mine completely. George followed, his expression unreadable. For the first time since they had entered my life, they didn't stop. They didn't speak. They didn't try to control the moment. They just left. I watched them go, feeling something settle inside me. Not anger, not triumph. Something quieter, stronger. They had tried to take my home, my independence, my voice, and they had failed. But the real outcome wasn't just that they lost. It was that I had finally stopped allowing myself to be diminished. And that was something no court could grant, and no one could take away. The house felt different the night they left. Not empty, just honest. For the first time in months, maybe longer, every room felt like it belonged to me again. Not because the furniture had changed back yet, not because the silence had returned, but because the tension was gone. The quiet wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. Ryan packed slowly. Chloe didn't. She moved through the house with sharp, efficient motions, pulling clothes from closets, sweeping items into boxes, barely acknowledging anything around her. There was no apology, no attempt to explain, no last effort to shift the narrative. Whatever version of control she had held onto before the hearing, it had slipped away completely. George didn't come back. That told me more than anything else. Ryan, on the other hand, lingered. He moved carefully, as if every step he took carried weight. I saw him pause in the hallway more than once, glancing at the photos on the walls, pictures of birthdays, holidays, moments frozen in time before everything changed. At one point, he stopped in front of the old photo of him and David in the backyard, both of them laughing, covered in dirt from building the garden beds. He stood there for a long time. I didn't interrupt him. Some realizations can't be rushed. The 72 hours passed quietly. No arguments, no dramatic confrontations, just the steady, undeniable process of departure. On the final morning, Chloe was the first to leave. She carried the last of her boxes to the car without looking back. When she reached the driveway, she paused briefly, her hand on the car door. For a second, I thought she might turn around, say something, anything. But she didn't. She got in the car and drove away, just like that. No goodbye, no acknowledgement, only absence. Ryan came downstairs a few minutes later. He wasn't carrying anything this time, just standing there uncertain, like he didn't quite know what to do with himself. "I'm done," he said quietly. I nodded. There wasn't much else to say. He shifted his weight, looking around the room. "It feels different," he added. "It is," I said. He took a step closer. "I know I've said it already," he began, "but I'm sorry. For everything." I met his eyes. There was no defensiveness there anymore. No excuses, just truth. "I know," I said. He swallowed. "I should have listened to you," he said. "I should have asked more questions. I should have." "Yes," I said gently. He stopped. Not because I cut him off, but because he understood. There were no more words that could change what had already happened. "I don't expect things to go back to normal," he said. "They won't?" I replied. He nodded slowly. I don't want to lose you," he said. That one stayed with me. For a moment, I felt that familiar pull, the instinct to comfort, to reassure, to fix things the way I always had. But this time, I didn't. Because this wasn't something I could fix alone. "I'm not disappearing," I said. "But things have to be different now." He looked at me, waiting. "Different?" how he asked. I took a breath. "You need to build your own life," I said. "On your own terms. Without depending on me to carry it for you." He nodded. "I understand. And if we're going to have a relationship," I continued, "it has to be based on respect, not obligation, not convenience." "I want that," he said quickly. "I know you do," I replied. "But wanting it isn't enough." He didn't argue, didn't push. He just stood there absorbing it. "I'm going to get a place," he said after a moment. "Something small. Start over." "That's a good start," I said. He gave a small, uncertain smile. "Can I come by sometimes?" he asked. "Visit?" I considered the question carefully. "Not right away," I said. His expression fell slightly, but he nodded. "That's fair," he said. "Give it some time," I added. "Let things settle." "I will." There was another pause. Then he stepped forward and hugged me. It wasn't the same as it used to be. Not as easy, not as familiar, but it wasn't empty either. It was real. "I'll do better," he said quietly. I didn't respond right away, because promises are easy, change is not. I hope so, I said finally. He let go, picked up his bag, and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he stopped. Mom, he said. Yes, thank you. For not giving up on me. I felt something shift in my chest. Not pain, not quite forgiveness. Something in between. I haven't decided that yet, I said honestly. He nodded. Then he left. And just like that, the house was mine again. That afternoon, I started putting things back. Not everything. Not all at once. But enough. I moved David's chair back to its place by the window. I found the old bookshelf in the storage room and brought it out, dusting it carefully before setting it against the wall. I even found the curtains my mother had made folded neatly in a box Chloe had labeled miscellaneous. I hung them back up slowly, smoothing the fabric with my hands. Each small action felt like reclaiming something, not just the space, but myself. Later that evening, I sat in the living room with a cup of tea, watching the light fade through the windows. For the first time in a long time, I felt calm. Not because everything was fixed, not because the pain was gone, but because I had drawn a line and I had held it. I thought about the past year, the compromises, the silence, the moments I had chosen to ignore my instincts in the name of keeping peace. And I realized something. Peace that comes from silence isn't peace, it's surrender. And I wasn't surrendering anymore. A few days later, I received a letter from Ryan, handwritten, simple. He didn't ask for anything, didn't justify anything. He just told me where he was staying, that he had started a new job, and that he was trying, really trying. At the end, he wrote, I know I have a long way to go, but I'm walking it. I read the letter twice, then I folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer beside my bed. Not as a promise, but as a possibility. Because healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small, quiet steps. And for the first time, I was willing to take them. A year has a way of revealing the truth. Not the kind of truth that explodes in a single moment, but the kind that settles, slowly shaping itself through time, through choices, through what people do when no one is watching. It had been exactly 12 months since the day Chloe told me to leave my own home. 12 months since I chose not to. The house felt different now, not just because it was quiet again, but because it had been rebuilt with intention. Not physically, though I had made changes there too. The walls were repainted in softer tones. The living room had been rearranged not to erase the past, but to make space for something new. David's chair still sat by the window, but beside it now was a second chair, one I had chosen for myself. A place not just to remember, but to live. I had also started something I never imagined I would. It began small, just a conversation with a neighbor who had gone through something similar. Then another. Then a small gathering in my living room, women sitting in a circle, sharing stories they had kept quiet for far too long. Stories of being dismissed, overlooked, taken for granted, or worse, taken advantage of. I listened more than I spoke, but when I did speak, I told the truth. Not just about what happened to me, but about what I had learned from it. We called it nothing at first, just a group, a place to talk. But over time, it became something more, a network, a resource, a quiet kind of protection, because what I went through wasn't rare. And silence only makes it easier for it to happen again. Ryan didn't come back right away. That had been my boundary. And for once, he respected it. We spoke occasionally short phone calls at first, then longer ones as the months passed. He told me about his job, about the small apartment he had rented across town, about how strange it felt to start over at his age. I should have done this years ago, he admitted once. Maybe I said. But you're doing it now. That mattered more. He never asked for money, not once. And that told me something too. He was learning. Slowly, but genuinely. The first time I agreed to see him in person again, it wasn't at the house. It was at a small cafe halfway between us. Neutral ground. He arrived early. I could tell by the way he stood when I walked in, nervous, uncertain, like he didn't quite know what version of me he would be facing. I sat down across from him, studying his face. He looked older, not physically exactly, but in his eyes. There was a kind of awareness there that hadn't been before. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. "Hi, Ryan." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he took a breath. "I've been in therapy," he said. I raised an eyebrow slightly. "That's good," I replied. "I needed to understand why I let things go as far as they did," he continued. "Why I didn't question things sooner." "And what did you find?" I asked. He looked down at his hands. "I think I got comfortable," he said. "Let Chloe take the lead in everything. Told myself it was easier that way, that she knew what she was doing." I nodded. "And when it didn't feel right, I asked." "I ignored it," he admitted, "because facing it meant admitting I was part of the problem. That was honest, painfully honest, and that mattered." "I'm not asking you to forgive me," he said. "I just want you to know I see it now." I held his gaze. "I do forgive you," I said. His eyes widened slightly. "But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences," I added. He nodded quickly. "I know. And it doesn't mean things go back to the way they were," I continued. "I know that too." There was a quiet understanding between us then. Not perfect, not complete, but real. We talked for over an hour that day, about simple things, safe things, but also about the harder ones, the ones we had avoided before. When we stood to leave, he hesitated. "Can I come by the house sometime?" he asked. This time, I didn't say no. Soon, I said, "Not today, but soon." He smiled, a small one, but genuine. "Okay," he said, and that was enough. When he finally did return weeks later, it was different. He knocked, waited, didn't assume. I opened the door and let him in. He stepped inside, slowly looking around like he was seeing the house for the first time. "It looks good," he said. "It feels right," I replied. We sat in the living room, my living room, and talked. Not as owner and guest, not as authority and obligation, but as two people trying to rebuild something that had been broken, carefully, honestly, with boundaries. Chloe never reached out. Not once. And I didn't expect her to. Some people don't reflect. They retreat. And that was her choice. George Thurton later learned was under investigation for fraudulent activity related to several other cases. That didn't surprise me. What did surprise me was how little I felt about it. Not satisfaction, not anger, just distance. Because by then I understood something important. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about freedom. Freedom from fear, from manipulation, from the quiet erosion of your own identity. I had that now. Not because someone gave it to me, but because I claimed it. One evening, as I sat by the window in David's chair, I found myself speaking to him again. Not out of loneliness, but out of gratitude. "I think you'd be proud," I said softly. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was holding on to the past. I felt like I was standing in the present, strong, clear, whole. Because in the end, this was never just about a house. It was about knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone, no matter who they are, take that from you. There's a quiet belief many of us carry, especially as we grow older, that keeping peace means staying silent. That love means giving more, tolerating, more enduring, more, even when it costs us our dignity. But this story reminds us of something powerful. Kindness without boundaries becomes permission for others to take. Family is supposed to be a place of safety, not a place where respect is optional. And no matter your age, your role, or your relationship, you deserve to feel secure in your own home, your own decisions, and your own life. Standing up for yourself doesn't make you difficult. It makes you aware. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do, not just for others, but for yourself, is to say, this is where the line is. If you've ever felt dismissed, overlooked, or taken for granted by someone close to you, you're not alone. And more importantly, you're not powerless. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to stand your ground, even with family. What did you learn from it? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. I read every story, and your voice matters here. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe. Stories like this aren't just about drama, they're about true strength and the courage to reclaim your life. And if you stayed until the end, thank you.